beta cells.
Is that an immune problem?
An autoimmune disease.
It's an autoimmune disease.
Yep. So the body has, for some reason, said to the beta cells of the pancreas, you don't look familiar, so we're going to kill you. And so the person has no beta cells, no insulin, no way to control metabolism, and they kind of burn to death, if you will, in a way. They just...
What happens to type 1 diabetics if they eat nothing but fat?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. In fact, this allows a transition into the actual dynamics of fat cells. So if you had in fact, if you look at the earliest diet that was given to diabetic, type 1 diabetics, before they started using insulin, it was almost entirely carnivore.
Yeah.
You look at these old-fashioned prescriptions, it was this much fatty meat, and it would say fatty meat. Don't eat meat that is too lean.
Right.
Fat is a fuel that doesn't need insulin to tell it what to do.
Yep.
It can get into the cells of the body. The brain, which doesn't use fat, it readily uses ketones, which you'll make plenty of if you're burning a lot of fat. And so that would be the best way to ensure the type 1 diabetic lived as long as possible. But the great tragedy, when we discovered what was missing, Professors Banting and Best, by giving these patients insulin, that changed things. Now these people could live a long, happy life, but it shifted the paradigm, which was eat whatever you want and cover it with your insulin. This is a term any child, any parent listening to this who has a child with type 1 diabetes will have heard this. Asinine advice. This is a disease of not metabolizing glucose very well.
Right.
Why would we tell them?
And that includes carbohydrates.
Oh, yes.
They're converted to glucose.
That's exactly, yes, thank you. Yes, so all dietary carbohydrates are going to be converted to blood glucose to some degree or another. Some a lot, like the sugar bomb apple. Some very little, like a cruciferous vegetable like broccoli or something.
The inedible vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that you put in front of a newborn, a young little toddler, and they're going to push it off their plate because they inherently know, I don't want this. Yeah, so the type 1 diabetic, what used to be a carnivore diet basically became the same standard high carb diet. But you look at these poor kids with type 1 diabetes, it is a life of constant fluctuations, the constant anxiety. And yet now we know in human studies, what happens if you control the carbs, get them off the roller coaster? Sure enough.
It flattens.
It's a flat line, and their insulin dose just plummets.
Yeah.
And depending on how much you have to pay for insulin, that's a wallet-saving therapy.
Let me summarize.